I'm Paul Radu. I'm the executive director of the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, and an investigative reporter for the last 14 years investigating organized crime and corruption. And I'll let my colleague introduce herself as well.
Hi, my name is Miranda Patricic. I'm also investigative journalist working with the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, as well as regional coordinator for the Balkans region. I'm working with Investigative Dashboard, which is our tool designed to help reporters follow the money across the border. And we're going to be talking about our techniques in the next hour.
So yeah, we'll talk about advanced investigative techniques, and we'll try to get together a little bit into the minds of the criminals. We'll show you some tools that you can use in order to track down the money across borders. And we'll also give you an explanation about the fact that Russian oligarchs are now quite afraid about these EU sanctions, which seem very, very mild, at first, but we'll give you some reasons to believe that is not so. We are investigating large-scale money laundering and organized crime all over the world, but mostly in Eastern Europe, in our region. We are doing this in Mexico as well, in Central America, in Africa. And let me tell you, stealing money and being involved in organized crime is the same anywhere. Be it, La Cosa Nostra here and Ndrangheta, or be it Russian organized crime groups or Romanian organized crime groups. I actually come from Romania. Organized crime is always the same. Some it's a bit more sophisticated than the others, but in the end, it's about stealing money. It's about stealing money from our pockets, from everybody's pockets. Now, what we realized by working, for many years in this field is that even the title of this workshop is a little bit like a little bit of a mistake, because what you do when you investigate such people and organized crime is you don't usually follow the money. What you do is you follow the people. You follow the proxy person. You follow the banker. You follow the lawyer. You follow the address. You follow many other entities outside of the money realm. I'll start by giving you one example that might seem very sophisticated at first. What you see here is an infographics of one of the biggest thefts in the history of contemporary Russia. This is hundreds of millions of US dollars stolen from the Russian treasury, from the Russian budget, and ending up in various places in Europe and outside of Europe. So what you actually see here, this is the Russian budget right here, and then you see some of the beneficiaries of this money. This is called the Magnitsky case. The Magnitsky case is right now, a central point of quarrel, of disagreement between the US government, the Russian government, and the EU governments, many EU governments. So basically, it's the biggest theft in Russia. And as you see, the money followed a very convoluted route. But in the end, it's about money stolen from point A and money ending in point B here. So the road is very convoluted. As you see, there are Russian companies there. There are companies in the Republic of Moldova. There are companies in the British Virgin Islands, in the UK, companies in Cyprus, and so on. But a theft, again, is a theft. And criminals think like this. They steal from this point, and they put their money in this other point. And that other point is usually countries where you have financial stability, where you have a very stable banking system, and countries where you can invest in real estate being one of the things that these guys are after, because it's a solid investment. So let's take a quick look at this case. But first, I want to ask you a question. When we're talking about following the money, what do you see? What do you have in your mind? Or rather, I should rephrase it. How many of you have obtained banking records while investigating a grand corruption case or a grand crime case, an important crime case? How many of you? Please raise hands. So you see, I mean, banking records, which are actually the documents where you can follow the money, from there to there to there, are not available to us. They are available in some instances, but very rarely. Of course, there are leaks sometimes, and we've seen leaks, from Switzerland, we've seen leaks from Liechtenstein and other countries, but these are very rare, so we cannot count on them. This is why when we're following the money, we're looking for four main type of entities. What we are looking for is the beneficiaries, of course. I mean, we're looking for the interface in the real world between the stolen money and the actual people that stole the money. So in this chart that I designed here, you see there, right there on that corner, on the left-hand corner, a corrupt politician. So this is just a general example. So this would be the beneficiary. What we're also looking for is the formation agent. How many of you know what's a formation agent? This is the guy who helps the politician launder the money and steal the money. And I'll give you some examples right away because we'll put faces to all these people. So formation agents are tools that are used by organized criminals, by corrupt politicians all over the world, So sometimes in order to find where the politician hid the money, you need to follow not the money, but the formation agent. You see here, I put here a crime Joe. It can be a criminal, it can be a member of an Italian mafia group, of an organized crime group from Vietnam or from anywhere else in the world. I also put here, you have in this lower corner here, an entity called an unaware proxy. And we'll talk a little bit about proxies, about people like you in this room that are used in order to hide the interests of politicians, of corrupt politicians and organized crime. And you can actually be victims of this game where, if your identity might be stolen. And we'll see a few examples as well. We also have the criminal bank and the crooked banker. All this would not be possible without these guys, And then, of course, we have, the government, and some guys in the government might be part in it via the corrupt politicians and so on. So let's actually go back to the case that I showed you before. You see, this is very complex. So how do you think, the money went from the Russian budget all the way to Cyprus, for instance? Who designed all this money trail? Do you think the politician did this? Does he have the time to design all this? These are sandwich companies. Sometimes you have a company here in Italy that is owned by a company in Cyprus, that is owned by a company in the Seychelles, that is owned by a company in Delaware, and so on and so on. Well, it's not the politician who does this. It's not the crooked politician or the criminal. These are lawyers. These are accountants. These are people that know that, make their lives work designing such sandwiches. Sometimes these are called tax optimization schemes. But most of the times, especially when servicing corrupt politicians or criminals, these are straight away criminal schemes to not only minimize taxes. That might be fair, because in some states taxes are very, very high. It might be immoral, but it's legal. But most of these schemes are used in order to steal money, to steal public money, or to launder money from various sorts of illegal activities like drug trafficking. Now, let me put a face to one of these guys designing these sort of companies. Yes, this is one of them. This guy is called Laszlo Kiss. He actually established companies and such sandwiched systems for most Romanian politicians who are involved in corruption. So if you had a politician that wanted to launder some money or to get a bribe, they would go to this guy. Now, we approached this guy, we went undercover, and we asked him for the same services, and we told him we proposed two scenarios. One, that we have to launder a lot of money from outside of the country, outside of Romania, and one that we need to import some mineral oil from Nigeria into Romania without paying tax. What the guy did was he took a piece of paper and he started drawing the scheme. He said, what you need is a company established in Bulgaria that is owned by a company in Cyprus, that is owned by a company in Delaware, and so on. And he invoiced us 11,000 US dollars for that. But that was not all. He also asked for a 1% cut of both businesses. So these guys are not just providing the service, they are usually part of the deal because they know that what you're doing is illegal and they take advantage of that. They want to be in it because they know that the big money is not in the service that they provide, although 11,000 US dollars to establish a sandwich of companies is kind of lots of money, but these guys are greedy, you know, they want more. Now, we exposed this guy, you know, and the guy ended up, you know, being busted by the prosecution in Romania, you know, and there's a court case involving him and so on. Okay, but how do you think a Romanian guy like this ended up designing such complicated schemes? He's actually a very clever guy. He's a very clever guy. But, you know, in order to be able to establish at the same time, you know, companies in all these jurisdictions, in all these countries, you actually need to be part of something bigger. So he was actually part of a network, of a much, much larger network that was actually established at first in New Zealand and Australia. So he was co-opted in this network. Now, the guy who started the network is a British guy who established himself in Australia and New Zealand, and he started co-opting people all over the place, lawyers, that would set up hubs for him. It's like us, you know, we are cross-border investigative reporters, and we need contacts in every country in order to cover a subject better. So what Ian Taylor was doing was he established a network of formation agents. And together with Mr. Kish, and together with other members of this network, he would organize workshops just like this, but instead of being called advanced investigative techniques, would be called advanced hiding the money techniques. No, sure not. I mean, they'd actually be called tax optimization techniques, you know. We went undercover to some of these meetings, you know. For instance, there was one that took place in Kiev, and our correspondent there went there, you know, and he had to pay a fee to get in and all that, and there were lots of rich people there, and these guys would present the schemes, you know, in order to hide the money. What these guys are doing is most of the time they are preying on innocent citizens. Let me show you this guy. So we're going from formation agent to the tool of the formation agent, who is the proxy. Now this guy, when we published a story about him, you know, he was 18 years old. He's now almost 20. His name is Boris Devdier. He's a kid. He's a kid from Chisinau, the capital of the Republic of Moldova. His dream was to come into the EU to find some work here. And one day he found a guy, he came across a guy who offered him this opportunity and said, okay, what you have to do is to bring me your passport, give me 500 euros, and I'll get you a Romanian visa. And with a Romanian visa, then you can move elsewhere. Boris Devdier took the money from his house. His mother was ill with cancer. They were very, very poor guys. He stole the money basically from the house. He paid that guy. He gave him the passport, and he never saw the passport back. What he saw were letters coming from Romanian prosecution summoning him to appear before courts in Romania because the companies where he was a shareholder were involved in massive fraud. So what the guy did that took his passport was he used the passport in order to establish companies that were afterwards used in fraud. So this is the second tool that criminals use. These are proxies. But not all proxies are like Mr. Boris Devdier. I'll show you a different kind of proxy. What you see here in this infographic is, trying to blow this a little bit, is the ownership of a TV station, of one of the main TV stations in the Republic of Moldova. Because yes, these schemes are applied in the media a lot. And criminals love to own the media, especially in Eastern Europe. You know, this is a huge, huge problem. So what you see here, it's one of the main TV stations there, Publica TV, that used to be owned by this guy before we exposed him, this proxy director, Anatoly Zoschuk. And Anatoly Zoschuk was actually a former bodyguard, with no knowledge about the media whatsoever, but he became the director of this TV station. There was another person that was involved with this one, but I see I didn't open the picture. Anyway, a lady. Now, Mr. Anatoly Zoschuk was not an unaware proxy. He was given a small amount of money to actually represent the interests of the bad guys in these companies and to hide the interests of these bad guys. So this is the second category of proxies, proxies that are given some money but are not directly involved in the crime. And when the deal is really, really big, you'll see that the formation agent, the lawyer, becomes a proxy. So whenever you find these lawyers, owning companies, that should be a red flag right away. Another tool that is used by these guys, as I mentioned, is crooked banks. Now, we are investigating cases of billions of dollars in money laundering all over Eastern Europe. Some of this money laundering took place at the height of the financial crisis, People were always complaining about the lack of money, about the lack of, means, resources. But these guys, especially in the ex-Soviet space, they were transactioning billions and billions on almost daily basis. This is one bank from Riga in Latvia. It's called Baltic International Bank. We identified in this bank companies established in New Zealand, but with a bank account in Riga, that were laundering hundreds of millions of dollars each year. One of these companies is called Tormex, for instance. Now, Tormex had its bank account in this bank, and what you see here is not a normal bank where you go in and you open up a bank account. Not any citizen can do that. This is a VIP bank, and there are lots of these all over Europe, actually. From Liechtenstein to Luxembourg to Switzerland, and also in Eastern Europe, in countries like Lithuania, in Latvia. Now I see them popping up in Azerbaijan as well. So these are banks that are servicing lots of corrupt politicians and businessmen. Now, I mentioned this company, Tormex. This company laundered in 2 years $680 million US, and the company was owned by a guy from St. Petersburg that was not aware that he was the owner of the company. So money laundering schemes like this happen a lot. We are investigating now a case, one single bank in the Republic of Moldova, just one, in the past year laundered $18 billion US. That's, many times over the budget of that country. Republic of Moldova, it's a very small country. Most of this money came from Russia, and then it went to offshore companies and to bank accounts in stable countries. So let's actually take a look at what happened to the money. You see here, again, complicated scheme, but in the end, the money went to this company called Prevezon Holdings. It's a company that is based in Cyprus, and to this other company also in Cyprus. Now, there's always a connection between this point, where the money arrives, and this point, obviously. And in this case, the connection is direct because the person that approved this huge refund from the state budget, from the Russian state budget, is this lady. So this is the direct connection. But the real beneficiaries, some of the beneficiaries were these guys. Now, Prevezon is a company based in Cyprus, but the bank accounts were at UBS Bank in Switzerland. We managed to track down this. But you see, these people don't just keep their money into bank accounts. You've seen criminals here, that invest their money in nice mansions, nice villas, luxury cars, and all this. This is what happens with criminals from our part of the world, and this is what happens with criminals from all over the world. So let's do a little bit of an exercise right now. Because what we do when we investigate such people is it's always a game between databases. Some of them are paywalled, some of them are open, some of them are built by hackers, some of them are built by other type of programmers and so on. But we're always switching between those databases and Google. right? We're going back and forth, back and forth. In this case, once we identified that the money went to Prevezon, we just Google searched, and we found that there were a bunch of companies in the state of New York, in the US, called Prevezon. You see Prevezon 1711, 1810, Prevezon Pine, Prevezon 7, Prevezon Soho. Now, what is Soho in New York? It's a place, right? It's a place in New York. So you see, whenever you see, because obviously these guys use lots of companies, but usually the name of the companies tell a story, you know, as the documents tell stories as well. So in this case, it's clear that these companies must be connected to a place. Now, this is the database of New York companies. It's free of charge, you know, and we were able to find out these companies. Also in the state of New York, and New York is, you know, I mean, in the world, you have a few places that attract these people very, very much. New York is one of them. Côte d'Azur, the south of France, is another one, you know. Here in Italy, there are certain places where they would invest their money as well. So, another database here in New York, and you actually don't have to write any of this down. My colleague will give you the place where you can get everything, you know, all these databases. So this is the Land Registry of New York, which is also free of charge and is on the web. Now here you can search for property records by party name, by other means. So take a look here. We looked for property owned by those companies, and what we found was property in the millions. You know, I think the most expensive one was $9 million US dollars. All this is dollars. Then it's 8,700,000 and so on. So this is a database that shows us that the money from here, from the Russian budget, went all the way to New York and was transformed into condominiums, bought in this skyscraper. The Pine Street is at the intersection of Wall Street and Broad Street, which continues with Broadway. So it's right there. So this would be one of the explanations why, you know, these Russians that cannot travel right now to the US because there are some visa bans and all that, and this happens also in Europe, you know, that they are quite angry. Because again, a thief would never put the money in the same place where he or she stole it from. And these guys, you know, invested a lot in our countries, you know, and in the West mostly. Now, as we see here in the same scheme, they use lots of companies, and some of these companies are actually offshore companies. And there has been a lot of talk about offshores. But what I want to point out is that any company in the world can be an offshore company. So don't just focus on companies that are based in the Caribbean, like, you know, the British Virgin Islands or the Cayman Islands, or, you know, like companies based in Cyprus or in the Seychelles, or even companies based in Delaware or Nevada. Because any kind of company, even any company here in Italy, can have the same status as an offshore company. Because you can create sandwiches of companies, and because most countries allow bearer shares companies. How many of you are familiar with what bearer shares means? So these are companies where you have 100 shares in it, you know, and a piece of paper that says 100 shares. If I have it in my pocket, it's mine. If I give it to Miranda, who will follow right now with her presentation, you know, then it's hers. So just keep in mind, proxies, formation agents, banks, and offshores. But offshores can be Privatstiftungs, for instance, from Austria, or companies in Romania. They can have the same status as offshores. They can hide the ownership. And Miranda, please.
Can you take questions now or later?
Yeah, let's just have Miranda finish. Sorry, I was too long.
So I will actually talk to you about how we do this kind of investigations. And what I've been doing for the past few years, I was working with the ID investigative dashboard, which is the project we have created in order to help reporters. And
I think you'll have to do it like this.
okay, it's not working otherwise. Okay. Okay. And I'll give you one example of how we worked with reporters and what kind of things we were able to do. And then I'm going to tell you how we actually did it. Okay. So this is a story about Telia Sonera. This is a telecom operator in Sweden, which have been expanding significantly to Central Asia. Okay. And back in 2007, they paid $320 million to a company based in Gibraltar. And at the time it happened, nobody actually raised the question, why would you be paying for a state telecom license to an offshore company that has nothing to do with the country where you're operating in? Okay. Until 2 years ago, when 2 reporters from Sweden came to me and they said, can you help us find out who this company is? And what we were able to do is basically get the records from Gibraltar and then started to follow the trail that took us in a number of countries around the world. Okay. We went to UK, we went to Switzerland, we went to Russia, we went to Uzbekistan, and many, many other places. And we did that without ever leaving our room or our office in Sarajevo, where I was based. Okay. After following the money and following all these trails, we were able to do a story proving that the $320 million that were paid were actually a bribe to a regime in Uzbekistan, the bribe for the daughter of the president. Okay. And when this story was published, Sweden being Sweden, there was immediate reaction. The investigation was launched. The CEO was forced to resign. Some of the money was seized. But also during the course of investigation, we discovered new people who were involved in the deal that we didn't know originally about when we started following the traces. And that has led us to France, a new country where we discovered that some of the money, some of the $320 million was actually used to pay for the luxury apartment in Paris and a villa in Saint-Tropez, but also this chateau near Paris, a very, very famous chateau. And of course, France being France, they went and they raided the properties, and hopefully soon they're going to start the action to seize them. Okay. Now this all sounds like, it took a year to investigate, right? But actually it took 3 weeks, including the time waiting for documents to arrive from Gibraltar to my desk in Sarajevo. And of course, it took a little bit more to tell the story and for the Swedish reporter to do their part. But the following the money, it didn't take that long. And basically, the way we did it was using public records. We never obtained a single banking records or anything that we had to develop sources to get. And you will see on the next slide, there are so many different public records. But very often, reporters don't even get the basic ones. Okay. I will not go through all of them because we don't have that much time. But the special records, and Paul has mentioned them, are business and land records. They provide so much information. And a lot of it you can actually get online. And even more you can get if you go to the land registry and physically inspect the files. So how do we follow the money? Okay. We start with the name of a person or a company. And all the names, if you've listened to what Paul was saying, if you notice what I was saying, it's all about the names of people. Okay? It's about taking a note of a name and then following the traces. It's also an address. It's a very, very important piece of information. It's something that identifies a person because a person lives on a certain address. It's something that identifies a company because the company is registered on one address. And then if it's a private home and you have multiple companies registered on that address, it's again another trace, another lead for your investigation. And of course, in case of person, it starts with the date of birth. Okay? But then also, when doing this kind of investigation, Paul talked a lot about proxies, lawyers, taking notes of all the people that are close to the subject you're investigating. So you would want to know who their relatives are. Who are the people who they're likely going to have their assets on? Who are their lawyers? Who are their very close friends? And the reason why I'm saying this is in case of Gulnara Karimova, only French companies were actually listed on her names. All the other companies were listed on the names of people who were actually working for her. So this woman, Gayena Vakian, who was the owner of the Gibraltar company, she was her personal assistant. Okay. Some other companies were run by her children's nanny, the governess, the cleaning lady. Another picture shows Hussein Salem. He was the guy who was the front for Hosni Mubarak. Okay. He was his close friend. In case of Montenegro, all the assets are on the Prime Minister's assets are on his brother and sister. He has very little in his own name. So what kind of sources of information do we use to track companies? There are many. I call some databases general databases. I don't know how many of you have heard of Lexis, Nexus, or Orbis. They're amazing sources of information. Because what these people do, they go to different business registries around the world and they buy data. Okay? They buy raw data, and what they allow you to do is to search the data by any name, any address, any word you want. Okay? And by doing that, you have access that you normally don't have because many of the business registries around the world are closed. They don't allow you to search by the name of a person. You can only get information if you know the exact name of the company. So they open the doors for you to another world that you can search in a different way. Now, I know these databases are quite expensive, but a tip for you, many business schools have them, many libraries have them, many cultural centers, for example, with the US Embassy would have them. So you can access these databases through them without having to pay a very high subscription fee. Okay, then we have another one, which is databases of the business registries in the different countries. And I'm going to show you a website, which is the only website of all you have to remember. It is called investigative-dashboard.org. Okay? This is a website we have created. And what we have done, we have spent many months trying to figure out how the companies are registered in different countries. Of course, we had the help of many of the colleagues who were sending us tips on how they access the data. And we have put it all together in one place. So if you're interested to find out where you can get company information in Switzerland, you go to Investigative Dashboard, you choose the Switzerland as a country, and I'll show the website a little bit later. And you choose a country and you get all the databases, not just the official business registry, but also any other database that is in that country where you can find company information. Okay. The next source, our official gazette. I don't know how many of you have ever looked at the official gazette. It's an amazing source for business information because, again, if you're not available, if you don't have access to Orbis, if you don't have access to LexisNexis, you can search official gazette by name. And, by searching for name, for example, in Luxembourg, which is one of the tax haven, it's very popular among the Italians. You cannot, if you go to the business registry, you will see that you cannot search it by name of the person. But then if you go to a website of the official gazette, you can search and you can find which Italian have companies in that tax haven. It's another amazing source we use.
Just one remark here. What we're showing to you is online resources, but always keep in mind that there's more information in the offline world. If you actually go to the office, if you actually go to the court, you get much more.
Okay. Another source, court records. Businessmen get in fight. And then if you are lucky enough to find a court case or dispute between them, you get a huge amount of information, including in the offshore jurisdiction. There is a website called Offshore Alert where you can actually search through the court cases in the offshore jurisdictions. It's fascinating. And the final source are scraped databases. Paul has mentioned that there are many databases that are created by the, tech people, hackers. One of them is a database of Panama. There was an amazing guy, Daniel Hugen, who scraped the Panama Business Registry and allowed it to be searched by the name of a person. So you can go and type in any surname, like Italian surname, and see what kind of people you get. Okay. Another tool I use are Google Maps. Okay. And the reason I use them, if you type in an address, okay, First, it's going to give you an idea what kind of, where the company is registered. Is it a big business building with a lot of other companies, or it's a private home? For example, in this case, this was a private home. And I discovered this private home in Switzerland. And while I couldn't search the database by the address, so I couldn't find out if there are any other companies on that address, the Google actually gave me another name of a company, which in the end turned out to be linked to the person I was investigating on that same address. Paul mentioned it. It's of huge importance to get not just online records, but also records that are available offline. Even in the offshore jurisdiction, for example, Netherlands, tax haven, if you go and order stuff online, you will get only a small piece of information. But if you get a complete file, you will get hundreds of pages, with signatures, with the original documents that were filed, with the annual reports, with company listings, and so on.
And also, we had many surprises while checking these offline records. Because, for instance, you'd find a company that was established somewhere in Serbia, in Belgrade, and in the dossier of that company, in the file, there were records proving that the company from the British Virgin Islands was actually established by this person, because the person had to open up a bank account on his or her name. So sometimes documents about offshore jurisdictions are not in the offshore jurisdictions, but are, with the registers of companies anywhere in the world.
Yes, because if you have a company, if somebody wants to come to Italy and incorporate a company, they have to provide a proof of identity. So information you couldn't really find in the British Virgin Islands, that information is available in Italy, because when they were providing the proof of identity, they actually had to submit some of the documents from British Virgin Islands, including a copy of the passports and all kinds of stuff that you can get offline. And of course, the final thing, when you deal with the very complex cases, for example, the one in Uzbekistan, we had probably about 50 names of people, so many different addresses, cities. It is always good to map the information. There is a tool we have created, it's called VIS, Visual Investigative Scenarios.
I'll show just briefly. Yeah.
Okay, just give me a second to finish. So this is, for example, the map. Go to the next slide. This is a map of Takilan story, and you can see that all the errors in the end lead to one place, which is Gulnara Karimova. So when you map out these things, it becomes very clear to you, while you couldn't manage all the information in one place. And this is all for me, and Paul is going to show you quickly with.
Yeah, we'll show you these two main tools that we're using. One is Visual Investigative Scenarios. This is a tool that we're using to map this information that we're getting, and the other tool is the tool that we're using in order to get actually get the information, to retrieve the information, and that is what Miranda already mentioned, the investigative dashboard. Now, this is a very simple tool, and it's free of charge. Usually this type of software that it's used by intelligence agencies and the police and stuff like that, and it's quite expensive. This is free of charge, is web-based, and you can create maps like this, connect A to B, and then you can export it as a picture or as an embed code to your website, and then you have some data behind it you can post, and it's very easy to use. You have a plus sign where you add the entity, and here you have people, businesses, organization, lawsuit, government, asset, and brand, and each has subcategories and so on. And then you just add them there, and you link them up, and so on. So it's quite easy to use. And this is a tool that I would advise you to use, in order to map some complex kind of relationships. You can always create, huge maps, but then isolate, entities that you want to focus on, and to only export, the links that you're interested in, and so on. So this is a tool that you can play with a lot. And Miranda will talk a little bit about the investigative dashboard.
Okay, so this is the website we have created. And you can see it's a very simple to use, and it has three parts. So when I talked about the official gazettes and scraped databases, what we are trying to do is to put them all in one place. So here on the first link, which is search the company or person of interest, we have compiled the Swiss official gazette, the Luxembourg official gazette, the Panama data, and a few other databases, and made them searchable. So you can put any search term. So for example, if I put Italy, you will see that I will get companies with the name of it in Italy. And then if we scroll down to pages after pages, you will see a Luxembourg company with Italian nationals who own them, and many other information containing this word. And of course, you can play with it and search by the name of a company, by the name of the person you're interested, by any other search term you can think of. Okay, if you want to know the agriculture companies in Panama, you can search agriculture. Okay. The second link.
It's actually open. All those three are the sections.
Okay, you have opened them. Okay, okay. So this is the second section I mentioned. This is the link to all the business registries. Okay. So, for example, if I use Switzerland, okay, you will see many different business registries. Okay. ZFCH, where is it? This one. Okay, this one, that's the official business registry. But as you can see here, there are a number of other business registries, including the land registry, that you can search you can access through ID. Okay, and the final thing is research desk, which is we have established it to help reporters, and we have worked with reporters from all continents in the world, and probably have helped and made hundreds of stories possible. Okay, and basically what you can do is you need to create an account and then file an information request. So you can say, I need help looking up this company, or I need help looking up this person. And then we can look up the databases that we have, or send you a link and say, okay, you can search Switzerland here. You can do it yourself. It's absolutely free. It's very easy to sign up. All you need is your Google account. So you sign in with the Google account, and then you create your own account with the ID, but we don't get your email address or anything else.
So I think it's time we make a disclaimer here. This is a project that we started originally ourselves, but then we teamed up with Google Ideas, and now it's a joint project with Google. So Google is financing it.
When SAC this.
Of course.
And just last piece of information, we now actually have researchers in Latin America, in the Middle East, and in Europe. And also we have a large group of research librarians from US who are willing to give their hand and help people access information.
Questions, if you have at this point. Yeah, please, sir.
You have mics. Guido Romeo from Wired Italy. So, hi, Paul. Hi, Miranda. Great work. Just two quick questions. One is, do you integrate at some point at the beginning or at some point in your investigations leads or court material from judges? Because usually what happens here in Italy is that we get papers from lawyers, from investigators, and then we start off from there. The other question is libel law. I don't know how it works in your country. It's pretty bad in England, and for us in Italy it's pretty bad too, especially because there have been cases of Italian journalists being charged for libel law with the English law in London, so that can be pretty rough. How do you go about that? Do you have a fund, and how do you also protect yourself? I'm thinking, especially when you had the scraped database, I mean, how you handle that part?
When you investigate organized crime, one of the strongest points of organized criminals and of corrupt politicians is the fact that they operate across many frontiers. So it's very hard for the police to follow their moves, because that takes, creating these joint teams, joint police teams to, just think about a criminal group that operates in Iran and in the US. Do you ever see the law enforcement of Iran cooperating with the US law enforcement, with the DEA or with the FBI? That will never happen. But for the criminal group, it's easy to operate in both countries. So this is their strong point, but this is also their weak point. It's what we exploit when we investigate organized crime. Because when they operate across many jurisdictions, the level of access to information is different in each country. So if in 6 countries, where the network operates, it's very restrictive, it's very hard to file freedom of information request or to find, judges that would talk to you, maybe there's one that where you could actually get some information. So I'll give you one example. We were investigating this case. Darko Šarić is a famous drug trafficker in the Balkans. He was just apprehended. He was captured, a few weeks ago. And, we tried for quite some time to get information about Darko Šarić from the Serbian police, from the police in Montenegro and other police forces in the region. And they would not talk to us. But then I went to Argentina, to Buenos Aires, and I found the judge there because some of the trafficking they were doing, some tons of cocaine that they were bringing into Europe was via Argentina and via Uruguay. And the judge there said, he gave me access to all the files, to the DVDs, CDs of the case and everything. Because, you see, law enforcement usually thinks like this. It's my country. I represent the interests of my people in the country that pay me from the budget. And, I seized the drugs, so my job is done. So once their job is done, you can talk to them. So the Argentinian judge gave us records that were the records shared with them by the DEA, by the Serbian police, by the police in Montenegro. So whatever those guys from these parts didn't want to tell us, it was there, and we got it, just from a different point in the network. Do you want to add a few words on the libel thing or this thing?
The libel thing, well, we do have a media insurance, which we are paying a lot of money. And that has proved to be very useful in one of the cases we actually had to deal with in United States. We were not sued in UK, but in the United States, and it was equally costly. But also we had free help from the attorneys, and we are trying to work on to create another system where we would have actually a bigger pool of people who would be willing to donate their time and help us fight any case, because the case that we were fighting in the court wasn't actually the case because we did something wrong or we published the information. It was just basically somebody suing us to make us pay money and losing that way.
Yeah, that's actually very dangerous. When you publish on the web, people can sue you in various countries, and this is what happened in this case. And criminals usually, or corrupt politicians, sue to save face, and you've seen this in Italy as well. Microfono.
Avete subito minacce per o qualche attentato alla vostra sede? Minacce generalmente i mafiosi operano minacciano i magistrati o operano contro i magistrati anche assassinandoli. Avete subito mai minacce voi? O atti intimidatori?
Yes, we had lots of threats actually, and but what happens, and Miranda had threats, I had threats, everybody in the network had threats. But you see what happens with these organized crime guys, the high-level ones. It's actually simpler. It's safer to investigate them than to investigate the drug trafficker at the corner of the street. And why is that? Especially in our part of the world, they own lots of media enterprises. So when we approach them and we say, hey, sir, we'd like to meet you because we have this information on you and you have to present your side of the story in this story that we're making, they always assume that it's not us asking the question, but someone behind us. And that's a kind of a very weird protection, but this is because they are handling the media, they own the media, and they know how their journalists work and operate. So when we come, they look at our websites, and they see, so they get some funding from USA, some funding from the Swedish government, some funding from. There must be some intelligence agency behind them. It's not these guys, It's just someone much more powerful, and that comes also to their ego. They can't see us as enemies because we are too unimportant. Yes.
I also highly appreciate your efforts, but let me play a little bit the devil's advocate and ask, don't these efforts make this system of hiding money just more sophisticated? Isn't the natural reaction to this that criminal activities will just get more and more detailed and tedious? Maybe you can talk a little about, I don't know for how many years you've been doing this, but maybe you can talk about the process and the evolution of what is the reaction from the criminal side to your investigations, to your investigations here.
Well, I think there is a big change compared to what was happening before, because first a number of records got opened up. You know, Cyprus was a major offshore jurisdiction, but many criminals, especially from our parts of the world, Russia, Eastern Europe, were actually establishing companies and hiding their assets. And what happened, they were never really careful. You know, they never really thought that somebody would actually check things. So you would see that some of the older companies, you know, their name appears there. And the same thing was, you know, people from Central Asia, in case of Azerbaijan, in case of Uzbekistan, they were setting up companies and actually listing their own names in those companies. So they were really not trying to design very clever methods. What is happening now is, yes, they're having more high-profile lawyers who they're paying a lot of money to develop very complex structures. But sometimes it's even the most complex structure can be broken down if you go and get every possible piece of information you can on a certain company. And, you know, sometimes, you know, they're very careful with the business registry, with the land registry, but then, you know, people go and register electricity in a home and they put it on their own name. So, you know, our game is basically chasing every single record and every single piece of information till we get the proof.
And one more addition to this is that, yes, they are becoming more sophisticated, but what we've also seen is after exposing lots of these guys, you know, and exposing them in a proper way, which means we're posting online the records that we based our stories on and the way we got those records and all that, what we see them doing is they move elsewhere. You know, that happens a lot. So we rooted out criminals from Eastern Europe, and we are chasing them down right now in West Africa, in Central Africa, you know. So they always target countries where the rule of law is very weak, you know, and this happens a lot. But by having them in databases, by exposing them, we can always prevent crime even. I'll give you just one example. A colleague of mine was coming from the Republic of Moldova, from Chisinau by plane. I was waiting for him on the airport, and he rushed out of the airport gates and was telling me, look, you wouldn't believe this. 3 major Romanian crooks were in the plane coming from Chisinau. They were in the business class of this small plane drinking champagne together. All these 3 guys were behind major fraud in Romania, and they were convicted and they were in jail, including the first member of the parliament to be put to jail in Romania. Now there are many. But before he was the first one. And these guys were together coming from Moldova. When we saw that, what we did was simple. We went to the Moldovan Registry of Companies and we searched for their names. And we found that they just established a company together with the wife of the head of the Secret Service in Moldova. And we exposed all this and their business fell down. So this was pre-crime, you know. But what we did in that case was pure luck, because my colleague was in the plane and he recognized them, you know, and I took a picture when they came out. I filmed them actually and all that. But what we are doing now, we are doing it in a thorough way. We're taking the names of all our controversial people and running them through databases in Panama, in there, just to be able, you know, to find them out before they even start the business. Other questions?
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm Andrea Menapace. Can you give us just a brief overview on the users? Are just investigative journalists, or maybe even charities, organization, public interest, association? Thank you.
Most of our users are actually investigative journalists. There is a lot of interest in Scandinavia, Middle East. A lot of interest in, and of course Central Asia and Eastern Europe, all the countries where, because the interest varies depending on what reporters are focused on. So in the countries where it's very, where there's a strong presence of people stealing public assets, you know, incorporating the offshore companies, the reporters for years have been dealing with this issue, so they're kind of using the benefit of it. When you look at some other countries, they're very centric, so they kind of don't see that the world has turned global and that they need to start paying attention to the foreign companies, or, you know, the things will be, bad things will happen in their countries without them ever uncovering them. We also do have some civil society groups who are doing good investigation. They're actually doing amazing work. I mean, in some places they're actually doing a better work than reporters. Because reporters are still not seeing themselves as the watchdogs of society and really trying to follow up things. We did have some requests by due diligence firms, but we haven't done any of them so far, and we don't know when we
Actually,
we are
lots
going
of
to be
requests
start
from due diligence firms.
doing them. And what's interesting, among people who register, we've seen that there are prosecutors from different countries. There are a few prosecutors from Colombia, Colombia, who have registered on the website, hoping that they can find some information to help them fight the crimes there.
And just to add on that, we are also organizing workshops. We got funding, for instance, from Open Society to organize workshops all over Eastern Europe. And most of our trainees there were activists and not investigative reporters. For instance, a few weeks ago, I was in Prague, and these are workshops that take 3 or 4 days, so we go very much in depth. And in the group, there were 16 people in all. And there were activists, most of them. There were also 3 secret service agents from the Czech Secret Service, and just 4 journalists. So activists are usually doing really, really amazing work. And I think this comes down to the media structures, the ownership structures of the media in Eastern Europe, unfortunately, and with the decline of investigative reporting everywhere, and Other questions?
How do you support yourself? The so-called business model?
It's mostly grants. So OCCRP, the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, is an umbrella organization over centers for investigative reporting, or we also have newspapers as partners. In Russia, for instance, we work with Novaya Gazeta. In Ukraine, we work with the Kyiv Post, and other partners. In Romania, we work with Rice Project, and so on and so on. And each of these centers, get their own financing, but at the level of OCCRP, we get funding, for instance, from Open Society, from USAID. Sometimes it's private donations. We just got some money from a Swedish private donor. There are micro donations at the level of our websites, but very convoluted route. But in the end, it's about money stolen from point A and money ending in point B here. So the road is very convoluted. As you see, there are Russian companies there are companies in the Republic of Moldova, there are companies in the British Virgin Islands, in the UK, companies in Cyprus, and so on. But a theft, again, is a theft. And criminals think like this, they steal from this point and they put their money in this other point. And that other point is usually countries where you have financial stability, where you have a very stable banking system, and countries where you can invest in real estate being one of the things that these guys are after, because it's a solid investment. So let's take a quick look at this case. But first, I want to ask you a question. When we're talking about following the money, what do you see? What do you have in your mind? Or rather, I should rephrase it, how many of you have obtained banking records while investigating a grand corruption case or a grand crime case, an important crime case? How many of you? Please raise hands. So you see, banking records, which are actually the documents where you can follow the money, from there to there to there, are not available to us. They are available in some instances, but very rarely. Of course, there are leaks sometimes, and we've seen leaks, from Switzerland, we've seen leaks from Liechtenstein and other countries, but these are very rare, so we cannot count on them. This is why when we're following the money, we look crime is always the same. Some it's a bit more sophisticated than the others, but in the end, it's about stealing money. It's about stealing money from our pockets, from everybody's pockets. Now, what we realized by working, for many years in this field is that even the title of this workshop is a little bit like a little bit of a mistake, because what you do when you investigate such people and organized crime is you don't usually follow the money. What you do is you follow the people. You follow the proxy person. You follow the banker. You follow the lawyer. You follow the address. You follow many other entities outside of the money realm. I'll start by giving you one example that might seem very sophisticated at first. What you see here is an infographics of one of the biggest thefts in the history of contemporary Russia. This is hundreds of millions of US dollars stolen from the Russian treasury, from the Russian budget, and ending up in various places in Europe and outside of Europe. So what you actually see here, this is the Russian budget right here. And then, you see some of the beneficiaries of this money. This is called the Magnitsky case. The Magnitsky case is right now, a central point of quarrel, of disagreement between the US government, the Russian government, and the EU governments, many EU governments. So basically, it's the biggest theft in Russia. And as you see, the money followed the king for four main type of entities. What we are looking for is the beneficiaries, of course. We're looking for the interface in the real world between the stolen money and the actual people that stole the money. So in this chart that I designed here, you see there, right there on that corner, on the left-hand corner, a corrupt politician. So this is just a general example. So this would be the beneficiary. What we're also looking for is the formation agent. How many of you know what's a formation agent? This is the guy who helps the politician launder the money and steal the money. And I'll give you some examples right away because we'll put faces to all these people. So formation agents are tools that are used by organized criminals, by corrupt politicians all over the world. So sometimes in order to find where the politician hid the money, you need to follow not the money, but the formation agent. You see here, I put here a crime Joe. It can be a criminal, it can be a member of an Italian mafia group, of an organized crime group from Vietnam or from anywhere else in the world. I also put here, you have in this lower corner here, an entity called an unaware proxy. And we'll talk a little bit about proxies, about people like you in this room that are used in order to hide the interests of politicians, of corrupt politicians and organized crime. And you can actually be victims of this game where, if your identity might be stolen. And we'll see a few examples as well. We also have the criminal bank and the crooked banker. I'm Paul Radu. I'm the executive director of the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, and an investigative reporter for the last 14 years investigating organized crime and corruption. And I'll let my colleague introduce herself as well.
Hi, my name is Miranda Patricic. I'm also investigative journalist working with the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, as well as regional coordinator for the Balkans region. I'm working with Investigative Dashboard, which is our tool designed to help reporters follow the money across the border. And we're going to be talking about our techniques in the next hour.
So yeah, we'll talk about advanced investigative techniques, and we'll try to get together a little bit into the minds of the criminals. We'll show you some tools that you can use in order to track down the money across borders. And we'll also give you an explanation about the fact that Russian oligarchs are now quite afraid about these EU sanctions, which seem very, very mild, at first, but we'll give you some reasons to believe that it's not so. We are investigating large-scale money laundering and organized crime all over the world, but mostly in Eastern Europe, in our region. We are doing this in Mexico as well, in Central America, in Africa. And let me tell you, stealing money and being involved in organized crime is the same anywhere. Be it, La Cosa Nostra here and Ndrangheta, or be it Russian organized crime groups or Romanian organized crime groups. I actually come from Romania. Organized. All this would not be possible without these guys, And then, of course, we have, the government, and some guys in the government might part in it via the corrupt politicians and so on. So let's actually go back to the case that I showed you before. You see, this is very complex. So how do you think, the money went from the Russian budget all the way to Cyprus, for instance? Who designed all this money trail? Do you think the politician did this? Does he have the time to design all this? These are sandwich companies. Sometimes you have a company here in Italy that is owned by a company in Cyprus, that is owned by a company in the Seychelles, that is owned by a company in Delaware, and so on and so on. Well, it's not the politician who does this. It's not the crooked politician or the criminal. These are lawyers. These are accountants. These are people that know that, make their lives work designing such sandwiches. Sometimes these are called tax optimization schemes. But most of the times, especially when servicing corrupt politicians or criminals, these are straight away criminal schemes to not only minimize taxes. That might be fair, because in some states taxes are very, very high. It might be immoral, but it's legal. But most of these schemes are used in order to steal money, to steal public money, or to launder money from various sorts of illegal activities like drug trafficking. Now, let me put a face to one of these guys designing these sort of companies. Yes, this is one of them.